I am truly sorry that the younger sister of the groom, Emma, is connected to such an outstanding family like us. To put it bluntly, someone like Emma, who only graduated from middle school, is nothing but a disgrace to the family. In my opinion, she should stay away from family gatherings and be mindful of her social status when interacting with us. The bride's father, his face turning bright red, delivered an astonishing statement with an unpleasant grin during the family representative's speech, speaking loudly. My father, mother, and even myself were taken completely off guard by those words. We never expected such a thing to be said in front of everyone at the wedding reception, and we found ourselves speechless, with our mouths wide open. Suddenly, the groom, Nate, who had abruptly risen from his seat, approached the bride's father with a gentle smile on his face. However, from our family's perspective, his expression clearly showed anger, and when my brother, who had come up to the bride's father, raised his arm, I hurriedly stood up to intervene. My name is Emma Brown. I work at a locally renowned construction company. I initially found it challenging to adapt to the predominantly male environment, but now I have become well acquainted with it and have developed good working relationships with the carpenters at this construction company. The foreman is still a strict and intimidating person, but I never disliked him because he shows his passion to pass on the skills he possesses to younger individuals. After everyone had left the construction site, I took a deep breath and loosened my body while contemplating such matters. I then silently began drawing the blueprints necessary for the next task. I finally finished drawing the blueprints, and it was already evening by the time I completed them. It was only then that I realized I had been working tirelessly without a break since lunch, and my stomach growled loudly. After reviewing the completed blueprints once more and nodding in approval, I began tidying up. As I prepared to head back to the apartment provided by the construction company, I noticed that there were sandwiches placed on the desk in the rest area, intended for takeaway. Next to them, there was a note with the foreman's neatly written message: "Make sure to have a proper meal." It made me happy, and I couldn't help but smile. I gratefully accepted the sandwiches from the foreman, and after securing the premises, returned to the apartment. Suddenly, my smartphone rang. Thinking it might be someone else, I looked at the screen, and to my surprise, my brother's name, with whom I hadn't had a conversation for years, was displayed. Unlike me, my brother has always been exceptionally talented from a young age. Although he was a bit laid back at times, he became even more dedicated to his studies. Graduating from medical school and now working as a surgeon at the largest and most advanced university-affiliated hospital in our hometown. Upon receiving a call from my highly respected brother, I placed the sandwiches on the desk and took a deep breath before answering. When I heard my brother's voice saying, "I'm glad you picked up," I couldn't help but feel a bit nervous. I asked in a trembling voice, "What's going on all of a sudden?" In response, my brother, with a somewhat embarrassed tone, explained his reason for calling. "Well, actually, I've decided to marry my current partner. I know you might be busy, but I really want you to come to the wedding. We haven't seen each other in so many years, and I've been thinking about it. It seemed like a good opportunity. What do you think?" In a slightly nervous tone, my brother spoke, and I replied, "Of course." He then smiled with great joy, warming my heart. After briefly updating each other on our recent lives, we reluctantly hung up the phone, suppressing the feeling of nostalgia. I don't know much about the person he is in a relationship with, but I assume he has already met our parents, and I can probably have a conversation with them about it before the wedding day. As I idly pondered these thoughts, I couldn't help but feel happy, and I decided to warm up the sandwiches the foreman had given me in the microwave and enjoyed my meal. The sandwiches that day seemed to taste even better than usual. A while later, I received the wedding invitation from my brother, and once the wedding date was confirmed, I talked to the foreman about taking some time off. After a brief pause, he gave me his consent. Relieved by his response, he chuckled and mentioned that there was a condition. It seemed that there was a request for me to take on the role of a guest lecturer for just 3 days at a specialized construction school run by an acquaintance. He asked me to consider accepting this teaching role. Presumably, that person had requested the foreman to be the guest lecturer, and I was in a dilemma about my ability to handle the task. The foreman chuckled and said, "I'm telling you that you can do it, so go with confidence." His words gave me determination, and I nodded firmly. As promised, I arrived at the address provided by the foreman on the designated day, and at the specified time. I found myself in front of a beautiful building, and to my surprise, the entire building was the campus of the specialized construction school. I couldn't help but look up in awe. I entered the building nervously and spoke to the receptionist. They directed me to the correct room, and I began my role as a guest lecturer. They directed me to a preparation room that had been set up for the guest lecturers. There, I was reviewing the content of my lecture when there was a knock on the door, and a man entered the room. I greeted the man with a puzzled expression by saying, "I'm Emma from the construction company." He stared at me as if assessing me, then let out a deep sigh. I see, even though it's our prestigious specialized school, he couldn't easily share his skills. We talked about preserving tradition, and yet I couldn't believe he was letting a woman in. "Well, please do your best this time. I believe there are limited things women can do in this field." Frustrated by his words and his intense stare, I stared back at the man and spoke up. Gender doesn't matter in any industry. Good work is achieved when individual personalities come together. Making dismissive comments about women while working in a specialized construction school is unacceptable. That's why this world doesn't change. Please don't give rigid prejudices to the young people who are about to enter the world of architecture. Also, I won't just do it casually for 3 days. I promise to make those 3 days meaningful for the students. Having heard my words, the man let out a frustrated sigh, as if he couldn't stand women who get cocky just because they manage to survive in a male-dominated world. He then turned his back and walked away. I glared at the man's retreating figure, determined that I would deliver a lecture that would undoubtedly make the students look forward to the next one. With a burning passion in my heart, I took my first step into the classroom for the lecture. And so, I successfully completed my 3-day stint as a guest lecturer, leaving the specialized school with fond farewells from the students I had become close to. I decided to provide a report, so I returned to the construction company and informed the foreman about the content of the lectures I had delivered during these 3 days. I also mentioned the disrespectful remarks made by the person in charge on the first day. After listening to my story, the foreman took a moment to think and then simply said, "I see, it must have been tough." But there were no specific criticisms, which made me happy, so I returned to my apartment, skipping with joy. And then came the long-awaited day of my brother's wedding. According to my parents, who had gathered at a hotel near the wedding venue the day before, my brother's fiancée was named Amy White. She worked as a nurse at the same hospital as my brother, and was not only responsible for taking care of hospitalized patients, but also highly skilled in assisting doctors in the operating room. As I recall conversation and made my way to the dressing room at the venue, I found the dress that my mother had prepared for today. When I saw it, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Although I was a bit bewildered by the fluttery dress, which was something I had never worn before, my skilled mother quickly took charge of my makeup and hairstyling. In no time, I found myself unable to look in the mirror, feeling too embarrassed to lift my face. After cooling my flushed cheeks, hearing compliments from my parents about how cute I looked, I made my way to the family waiting room. However, my attention was captivated by a particular man who was there. That man was undoubtedly the person in charge of the specialized school who had ridiculed me on that day. With a friendly smile, this man named Kenny White approached us, and it became apparent that he was Amy's father. I did my best to conceal my discomfort and kept it from showing on my face. Though I was taken aback by the unexpected reunion, I thought that we would probably only have to deal with each other today and wouldn't have any reason to speak in the future. Remembering the words from that day, I suppressed my irritation and proceeded to greet him after my parents. However, he either didn't realize it due to my dressed-up appearance or chose to ignore it, and he commented, "You look like a lovely young lady." This remark only increased my irritation. I had mostly been in a position of listening to my parents' conversation and avoiding unnecessary interjections. However, perhaps he felt considerate and thought of including me in the conversation as Kenny asked, "Emma, where did you graduate from university?" Unable to ignore him, and with a forced smile, I replied, "I graduated from middle school and started working for personal reasons." For a brief moment, Kenny's smiling face turned slightly distorted, and I felt like he gave me a cold stare. Observing Kenny's expression with a furrowed brow, trying not to be noticed, I saw him quickly return to a smile and say, "I see. That's interesting," before changing the subject. Although I had a strange sense of unease due to that brief change in expression, my brother and Amy's wedding ceremony began. Amy was even more beautiful than I had imagined, and the pure white wedding dress suited her perfectly. My brother, dressed in a matching all-white tuxedo, also looked incredibly dashing. Seeing them together made me smile warmly. As the wedding ceremony ended and we transitioned to the reception, my father suddenly began to look flustered. I asked him what was wrong, and it turned out that my brother had asked him to deliver the family's representative speech. He was wiping sweat from his brow and checking his notes. As I exchanged glances with my mother and shared a wry smile, the speech from the bride's family representative began before my father. Before my father's turn, Kenny seemed to be in high spirits, perhaps due to seeing his daughter in her bridal attire. He had consumed quite a bit of alcohol and had a flushed face. He appeared a bit unsteady as he was supported by the bride's mother. Eventually, he stood up and made his way to the microphone that had been prepared for him. As I watched Kenny confidently standing in front of the microphone, despite being somewhat drunk, I couldn't help but chuckle, thinking that he had a different air of authority compared to my father. Then, with the microphone in hand, Kenny bowed and began to speak with a smirk on his face. "Thank you very much for gathering here today to celebrate my daughter's wedding. Normally, I would like to offer words of congratulations as well, but I want all of you to know my true feelings. I am truly sorry that the younger sister of the groom, Emma, is connected to such an outstanding family like us. To put it bluntly, someone like Emma, who only graduated from middle school, is nothing but a disgrace to the family. In my opinion, she should stay away from family gatherings and be mindful of her social status when interacting with us." The suddenness of his words left me, my father, and my mother utterly speechless. However, in the corner of my mind, Kenny's earlier expression came to mind, and I now felt like I understood the reason behind it. A sense of frustration slowly welled up within me. Then, my brother, who stood up abruptly, approached Kenny with a calm smile. However, it was evident from his expression that he was clearly upset, a sentiment that was apparent to our family. As I saw my brother approaching Kenny and raising his arm, I stood up to intervene and stop my brother. However, my brother maintained a fixed smile and only took the microphone from Kenny. Seeing this, I halted my movement, and my brother began speaking to Kenny. "I believe that a person who values connections with people, just like you, shouldn't be unaware. But just to confirm, do you know my sister's profession properly?" However, Kenny, not understanding the meaning of the question, mumbled, "Huh," and froze in place. Seeing his reaction, my brother continued with his words. "Don't you know? You personally requested her as a lecturer at the specialized school, and you enjoy visiting old architectural structures like churches, right? Emma is a master carpenter involved in their restoration." Upon hearing my brother's words, Kenny started trembling and suddenly shouted angrily at my brother. "What? A woman as a master carpenter? Don't play dumb. Listen here. Being a master carpenter is a specialized and beautiful skill within the world of carpentry. World of construction, there's no way a woman could handle such a role." As Kenny continued to make a scene, seemingly forgetting that there were other guests at the reception, my brother maintained his smile and spoke once more. "What are you saying? Emma is a genuine master carpenter trained under the human national treasure, Mr. Herbert Smith. Are you really suggesting that she can't handle it just because she's a woman, since you were the one who reached out to him in the first place? Why don't you hear him out?" When my brother gestured towards someone, I looked in that direction and noticed the master carpenter sitting quietly in a less conspicuous corner. I was left speechless in astonishment. The foreman, who had been silent up to that point, grinned when he made eye contact with my brother and shot a piercing stare at Kenny. You're in a position to guide the young folks who will shape the future of the construction industry, yet you harbor such twisted prejudices, Kenny. I had heard about what was said when our Emma went to teach at your school. But this is on a whole other level. Listen up. Whether it's a woman or a man doesn't matter. It's about leveraging each person's strengths to cooperate and become the best we can be. If you keep going on about how it's a man's world, you'll be left behind by the times. And by the way, I'm pretty sure I made myself clear during the discussion about the teaching assignment. I said the best apprentice for this task is available. You think I'm underestimating things? If anything, from where I stand, you're the one underestimating us. Intimidated by the thunderous voice that echoed through the venue and the piercing gaze, Kenny's confidence seemed to evaporate. He turned as pale as a sheet and muttered, "I'm sorry," before returning to his seat in a daze. The venue remained agitated for a while, but then Ami stood up and, with a composed voice, said, "I apologize for the interruption. Let's take a short break and then resume." Then, with a pale face just like the stunned Kenny, I glared at his wife, who was frantically calling out to him, and she, as if influenced by that gaze, slowly led Kenny out of the venue. When the reception resumed, Amy's parents were no longer present, but she had a refreshed expression, which gradually lifted the atmosphere in the venue, and in the end, we were able to close it with smiles. Afterward, as the foreman was about to leave the venue, I stopped him and asked about the situation. He explained that despite being asked several times and having a brief conversation, Kenny had knelt and requested him to attend his daughter's wedding, so he reluctantly agreed to participate. When I murmured that it would have been nice if he had told me beforehand, he apologized and said he would make sure to communicate better in the future. We were attending the same wedding. He scratched his head with a reluctant look and said, "I didn't think there was any need to say it anyway." That guy probably just wanted to somehow establish a connection with me. However, even though it was by chance, the fact that he helped me remains unchanged. So I lowered my head and said, "Thank you." Then the foreman said with a wry smile, "I've always tried not to treat people differently just because they're women, but when he said something like that, it made me think." My older brother arrived and lowered his head to the foreman, saying, "Thank you for responding to the sudden act." The foreman said, "She is my top disciple, so being silent when someone goes that far is just unreasonable." He patted my head. I vaguely remembered the past as I felt the size and warmth of his hand. I was captivated by the work of a carpenter when I was in elementary school. During that time, whenever I had unpleasant experiences at home or school and needed to calm my feelings, I used to visit an old church. It was during one of those visits that I happened to come across the foreman who was repairing that church. And that's how it all began. I was watching their work in a place where I wouldn't be in the way, and I was completely captivated by their beautiful craftsmanship. From then on, I started researching the history of old buildings like churches, and I went to see them in person. As I grew up, I also sought out books about carpentry techniques and devoured them. I was completely enthralled by it all. And when I became a middle school student, I made a certain decision and decided to have a conversation with my parents about it. The decision was that once I graduated from middle school, I would become an apprentice to a master carpenter specializing in old-style construction and learn the craft to become a top-notch carpenter myself. However, naturally, my father strongly objected. He said it would be difficult for a woman and that there were more suitable places for a woman to work. He shook his head and refused to agree. But I just couldn't give up, and I continued to persuade my parents day after day. One day, seeing me in that state, my mother came into my room and spoke to me, who had been defeated by my father's arguments, lying face down on my bed. Sitting at the edge of the bed, my mother gently stroked my head and said, "I understand that becoming a carpenter is a challenging path, and I think I'm saying this because you know it. I won't oppose it, but you'll have to show your determination to your father." After thinking it over for a while, I felt that this was the only path for me. So, I visited the construction company and lowered my head to the foreman, who had already been recognized as a living national treasure at that time, and asked him to take me as his apprentice. At first, I was turned away from a place where women weren't traditionally allowed to enter. However, I kept going for several months, and even if I couldn't get inside the shop, I continued to wait for the foreman to come out and kept bowing my head. And then, during the winter of my second year in middle school, after numerous attempts at pleading, the foreman finally burst into laughter. He walked towards me, surprising me, and said, "I'm going to visit your parents right now." On the day when the foreman actually came to our house, my parents were bewildered, but the foreman bowed deeply in front of them. This young woman will surely become a top-notch carpenter someday. I can see a burning passion in her eyes. "Please, believe in me and entrust your daughter to me," he said. The foreman looked at me with a kind gaze and gently placed his hand on my head. Even though my father still seemed reluctant, my mother, with tears welling up in her eyes, said, "Please take care of her." Seeing this, my father also lowered his head towards the foreman, holding back tears, and my older brother, who had witnessed many arguments between me and my father, looked at us with an indescribable expression, a memory that I still vividly recall to this day. However, while I was determined to take the first step towards my dream, the days that followed were by no means filled with only enjoyable moments. After graduating from middle school, and with my parents' permission, I moved into the apartment provided by the construction company and began learning the job. However, at first I was often assigned to site cleanup, which was extremely physically demanding, and I struggled to keep up with my senior colleagues. Every time the work was delayed because of me, there were many instances where my senior colleagues got angry with me, saying things like, "This is what happens with women," or "Don't come here with half-hearted determination." Nevertheless, I didn't let it discourage me. I continued to watch and learn from the foreman and my senior colleagues' techniques, occasionally receiving guidance from the foreman himself. Before I knew it, I had grown to the point where I was entrusted with tasks alongside my senior colleagues. My senior colleagues began to acknowledge my skills more and started to smile and interact with me more. Finally, I'm starting to find enjoyment in my work now. I had thought that it would take much longer to earn the foreman's recognition, but just a while ago, he clearly stated that I am his top disciple. I was so happy and grinning, but then he reminded me not to get too carried away, saying, "There's still a lot to learn." It felt like the usual foreman had returned, and I couldn't help but straighten my posture. Watching the exchange between me and the foreman, my older brother chuckled and looked at me straight in the eye. "Emma, there's something I've wanted to say for a long time. Seeing you face your dream of becoming a carpenter head-on and working hard to make it a reality, well, it made me realize that I could do more. It inspired me to strive for the highest I could reach in my own studies, which led me to become a doctor and help many people. I believe that if I hadn't witnessed your determination that day, I would have lived a much less fulfilling life. So thank you, truly." As he said this, I tightly squeezed my brother's outstretched hand while trying to hold back tears, and it felt like a warm sensation was flowing into my heart. And both our parents and the foreman were watching us, brother and sister, with kind eyes. In the end, after that incident with Kenny and the fear of upsetting the living national treasure foreman, Kenny experienced his first setback, having never faced failure before, having graduated from a prestigious university. He struggled to bounce back from it, and eventually he decided to step down from his position as chairman of an educational institution, passing it on to his successor. Amy shared this with me when she came to apologize to me again. She was apparently fed up with her father, who was obsessed with academic achievements, and her mother, who accommodated that mindset. So, when I saw Amy laugh confidently and declare that she was cutting ties with them, I couldn't help but exchange a knowing smile with my brother, both of us chuckling. I continued to learn the craftsmanship of a carpenter under the foreman while working harmoniously with my senior colleagues. However, in reality, I have taken on another job. It's a job that the school formally requested, after receiving requests from students who had previously taken special lectures. I teach carpentry techniques at a construction-focused vocational school twice a week. Both jobs are fulfilling, and I'm currently leading a very satisfying life. One day, when I reported about my work at the vocational school, the foreman suddenly burst into laughter with a joyful expression on his face. If I hadn't met you, I probably wouldn't have allowed women on the construction site even now. And I never even thought about passing on my skills to people with such different aspirations like this. You're the one who changed me. Watching the foreman laugh like that, I couldn't help but smile, and I felt a warmth spreading through my heart. I thought to myself that it was a good decision to work here. For 5 years now, I have been in a relationship with my special girlfriend, Emily. We first met during our company's orientation day, where most female employees wore skirts, but Emily stood out by wearing pants. I have had surgery in the past, resulting in a prosthetic leg. Emily also has a prosthetic leg which she has been using since elementary school. Despite this, she does not let it hinder her daily life, although she does have to be selective about her clothing choices. She cannot wear tight clothes or skirts, but she compensates by wearing accessories, as she mentioned. I was drawn to her positive attitude and eventually confessed my feelings, and we officially started dating. Emily always wears a silver ring on her right middle finger, which resembles an art sculpture in the studio, shaped like a wreath. She once told me that this ring is the reason she recovered from her illness and is now living a healthy life with pure joy. This inspired me to ask her if I could give her a special ring as well. When we both turned 28, I proposed to her. Before introducing her to my parents, I decided to visit them after a long time and talk about Emily. When I told them about my desire to marry someone, they were overjoyed. I showed them a picture of us together intending to talk about Emily. My dad exclaimed, "What a lovely girl." However, my mom turned pale and said, "Could it be? This is the ring I made." She then revealed that Emily is the same girl who was hospitalized 17 years ago. My mom, who worked as a nurse at the time, took care of an 11-year-old girl with osteosarcoma who needed chemotherapy and surgery on her affected leg. The girl had to have her leg replaced with a prosthetic, and the side effects of the medication caused her hair to fall out. She lamented about not being able to wear skirts and losing her hair. My mom couldn't bear to see her suffer, so she suggested that she could still beautify her hands with nail polish and rings. She promised to be there for her until she was discharged. Encouraged by these words, the girl nodded in agreement. Mary and the girl enjoyed being on the rooftop or outside because the smell would fill the room if they did a manicure inside. Mary used to do manicures in secret for the sake of the girl's fashion, even when the senior nurse, Catherine, would get angry with her. The girl gradually warmed up to Mary, a nurse who was very kind to her. Seeing her happy made Mary happy too. Mary then decided to hand-make a ring for the girl to wear, hoping it would give her strength during her surgery. Every night after work, Mary began crafting a ring from art clay silver. The ring was shaped from a material called silver clay, scraped clean so that it would not hurt when touched to the finger, and then baked and polished. While I was never into crafts, I remembered seeing Mary crafting a ring back in elementary school. I never imagined it was for that hospitalized girl. A week before the girl's surgery, Mary gave her the handmade ring. Until then, the girl had only worn plastic rings, so she was thrilled with the more adult-like ring. Mary always worked with the belief that she wanted to be the most compassionate nurse. Despite being exhausted from her work and the uncertainty of her husband potentially relocating for his job, the girl's smile made it all worth it. "Did you make this for me?" Emily asked. "It's a little snug here. I'm sorry, it's handmade, so it's not perfect." "That's okay," Emily replied. She tried to put it on her left ring finger, but Mary stopped her. "Why not save that finger for when you get married to a lover?" Then, with tears in her eyes, Emily said, "I don't know if I'll live long enough to get married." "That's not true," Mary reassured her. She knelt down, took Emily's hand, and encouraged her. Although meeting Mary had brightened Emily's spirits, she still had internal fears. Would the surgery go well? How long would she live? Mary reassured Emily and asked her to wear the ring on her right middle finger. "It's a protective finger," I hope it'll ward off any illnesses. Emily nodded and slid the ring onto her right middle finger. It was a little too big, but that was Mary's wish, hoping Emily would continue to wear it as she grew older. Afterwards, Emily wore the ring, which she believed had protective powers, when she went into surgery. The surgery was successful. Around that time, my dad's relocation was confirmed. The family debated whether my dad should go alone or if they should all move. Though I didn't want to leave my school friends, I also didn't want to be away from my dad. The idea of the family living apart was unthinkable. When I voiced my opinion, it was decided that Mary would also go. Mary decided to quit at the hospital. Her patient, Bob, from the ward where Mary worked, thanked her, saying, "Thank you." Being a nurse who always considered her patients, she had many admirers. Mary also told Emily, who had just undergone surgery, about her leaving. Mary had promised to be with Emily until her discharge, so she felt very guilty. When Mary told Emily that she wouldn't be around to see her recovery, Emily cried out in anger. "You promised to stay with me until I'm discharged. My treatment isn't over. You're a liar." Emily cried uncontrollably, but there was nothing Mary could do. Even when Mary apologized, Emily just hit her gently in frustration. After that, Emily distanced herself from Mary, and when she came to say goodbye, Emily, lying in bed, wouldn't even look her way. Mary, always caring for her patients, regretted this deeply. I always felt guilty about making Emily cry when we parted, but now I see how she's grown up. The ring that Emily was wearing was unmistakably the imperfect one Mary made, and upon seeing a picture of it, she cried. I was astonished by such a coincidence. "I really am sorry for back then," Mary murmured. Mary thought Emily had resented her, but I thought otherwise. When Emily told me about the ring, she looked very happy. If Emily had hated the nurse who left her, she wouldn't have been wearing the ring and wouldn't have spoken so fondly of it. "You know, I proposed to this girl recently. I'd like you to meet her soon." My dad readily agreed. Mary looked a bit awkward. To clear up the misunderstanding, I felt I absolutely had to bring her along. 2 weeks later, I put a nervous Emily in the car and headed for my parents' home. Upon arrival, Emily got out of the car with a gift. Today, Emily was also wearing her protective ring. I entered first, and Emily followed behind. My nervous-looking dad and mom came to the entrance. Mary's expression was tense. "Hello, nice to meet you. I'm Emily Johnson. I'm dating Harry here." In response to her formal greeting, my dad invited her in, saying, "Please relax." Gently pushing a still nervous Emily, I then patted my mom's shoulder. Sitting on the couch, we told my parents about how we met. We also announced our plans to marry. Emily talked about her past illness and the prosthetic on her leg. Although Emily wore loose pants, her prosthetic ankle was visible. My dad nodded at Mary, who then took a deep breath and spoke. "I noticed she wore that ring when Harry showed me your photo before. What's that about?" asked Emily, lovingly touching her ring. She explained, "This was given to me by a nurse when I was hospitalized. She said it was to help me get better." Mary looked distressed, but then that nurse suddenly left and I felt so lonely and upset. I cried a lot. I wanted to tell her I loved her and wished she'd stay, but I couldn't express myself. Emily confessed that back then she truly felt lonely but couldn't convey her feelings. Upon hearing these words, tears flowed from Mary's eyes. To a flustered Emily, Mary also confided in her. "Actually, I was that nurse. I'm so sorry I couldn't be with you until the end. I've always thought that little girl hated me." Emily rushed forward, shaking her head. "Not at all. I've always loved you. I was just being stubborn back then, sorry." She added, "I still wear this ring as a charm. Thanks to you, I got better and have been living a healthy life." Mary transitioned from saying, "I'm sorry" to, "Thank you," patting Mia's back. It was a moment where a misunderstanding from 17 years ago was cleared. Mary, who had lived with the regret of that time, thinking she was despised, was overjoyed to learn Emily had cherished the ring all along. With the power of the ring Mary made and Emily's strong will, she overcame her illness without a recurrence. Now Emily wears the ring from Mary on her right middle finger and one from me on her left ring finger, protecting the ring filled with Mary's wishes. Having overcome her illness, Emily is now married to me, and we are enjoying our newlywed life. For instance, being wrongly accused of something you didn't do. Or realizing the love you thought was mutual was actually one-sided. Life has its fair share of hardships and disappointments. But these could be supposed to happen to help us grow stronger. It's up to the individuals, whether they think that way or not, but I think I'm fortunate to realize that. My name is Carter Thompson. I'm a researcher at a pharmaceutical company, mainly studying the components of medications. Originally, I have a scientific background, and I love investigating and understanding something thoroughly. So I got absorbed in researching during college, and now I get to do what I love for a living. Thanks to that, I've been given the responsibility of leading my team, and I'm quite proud of where I am today. One day, out of the blue, I was called by the company's CEO, Mr. Johnson. Having no idea what it was about, I rushed to his office. Mr. Johnson was waiting for me with a big grin. "Hey, Carter, I've heard a lot about you. They say you have an amazing talent." "Oh, don't be so nervous. It's nothing bad." Saying this, he gestured for me to have a seat on the sofa. After some small talk, I started feeling doubtful and tense because he took a long time to get to the main point. However, I still nodded along with the conversation. Finally, he cleared his throat and said, "By the way, do you have any plans to get married?" "Married, you say?" "Well, I suppose I'd like to eventually." His smile got even bigger when he heard my answer. It turns out that his daughter Emily is 25 years old this year, and he's been hoping she'd find someone. And my name came up as a recommendation from the head of the research department. So he showed my photo to Emily and told her about my career. She apparently showed interest in me. To be frank, I haven't really thought about marriage yet. And to begin with, I didn't even know my personal details were being shared. If I were to get married, would a wife really be okay with a husband who's constantly absorbed in research? I would feel guilty if I left her feeling lonely. To be honest, I don't know much about romantic relationships after all. Mr. Johnson seemed to understand my thinking, and he said with the same smile, "Don't overthink it. At least meet her once. You can decide afterward whether to continue or not." I just buckled under the pressure of his smile. I agreed to have a matchmaking dinner with her. After all, that matchmaking date drastically changed my life. Emily, the CEO's daughter, was a typical naive and modest heiress, so to speak. I'm not sure if it's because both my university and workplace were male-dominated and I lacked romantic experience, but I found Emily endearing. We shared hobbies and had nice conversations together. Day by day, her place in my heart grew. When I expressed my feelings to Emily, to my surprise, she said she felt the same way. From there, everything progressed rapidly from engagement to marriage. Our married life is smooth sailing. We have a happy marriage. Even though we met through matchmaking, I still consider our relationship to have developed through dating and romance. Since marrying Emily, I've received blessings, some teasing, and even envious or jealous glances from those speculating that I might become the next CEO just because I married the current CEO's daughter. But that's really up to the company to decide. The reality is that marrying Emily doesn't automatically make me the successor. Personally, I think I'm more suited for research than running the company. Oh man, the future CEO probably looks down on us researchers, for sure. As I was pointing out an error in a junior colleague's report, a coworker named Jake Miller interrupted. When I glared at him silently, he exclaimed, "Oh no, if I'm on the bad side of the future CEO, I won't last here." He's so childish that I didn't even bother replying. Jake has always had a harsh attitude toward me, but since my engagement to Emily, his behavior has only gotten worse. He constantly throws envious glances, makes snide remarks, or outright ignores me. One day, many people who were test subjects for a new drug that my team was overseeing reported health issues. The trial was immediately halted, and the new drug was recalled for investigation. Fortunately, the health issues were minor, like headaches or mild fevers, and there were no severe after effects. But they are still victims, and we need to provide some form of assurance, namely compensation to the affected individuals. It's quite costly for the company and damages our reputation. Naturally, as the leader, I am held responsible. Upon further investigation of the new drug, foreign substances were immediately detected within it. There was no report of such substances in the preclinical ingredients list, and I did not see any indication of them during the testing process. When I checked, I didn't see anything. Questions arose like when and where these foreign substances got into the drug and why no one noticed before the clinical trial. The whole team really overlooked it. My request for a reinvestigation was ignored, and I was told to stay home until further notice. The journey home with such a big disappointment was incredibly long. What could I say to Emily? Would she be sad? She might even cry. No, there's no need for her to be sad since I've done nothing wrong. All I can do is tell her the truth. Emily must believe in me. She already knew about me being placed on leave. She probably heard it from the CEO. Without even looking at me, she was packing her things. Dad said you would get promoted quickly and eventually get a higher rank in the company someday. That's why I married you. She's shouting something that doesn't make any sense like that and throwing a book at me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have married a guy like you. What a waste of time this marriage was. While I was trying to understand what she was saying, Emily headed for the door. Wait, Emily, let's talk. Don't call my name so casually. Her shouts caused me to retract my extended hand. She left an envelope on a side table by the entrance saying, "Make sure you fill this out." Then she left. I was dazed for a while and realized that Emily never truly loved me. I thought our marriage was based on love, but it seems like I was the only one thinking that way. She married me for my status and money. Realizing my naivety, I couldn't even cry. Inside the envelope on the counter was, as expected, a filled-out divorce form. Even the CEO and his wife had signed as witnesses. I had no idea when she had prepared this. Did the CEO and his wife know about Emily's feelings from the start? With that thought, even though the doubts that had been cast on me would be cleared, I wouldn't have the courage to return to the company. A few days later, I sent all the necessary documents for the divorce, including the divorce form, my resignation letter, and an apartment lease cancellation form, to Emily's parents' home in Nebraska. I decided to stay at my parents' place in rural Texas for a while. When I told them about the divorce and quitting my job, they didn't press me for details and simply told me to take it easy. Their words meant so much to me during this time. I think I'd like to take some time to relax at my parents' place for a while, as they say. However, being in the countryside, there wasn't much to do. Both of my parents are retired, but they work part-time jobs, so only my grandmother is at home during the day. One day, I decided to accompany my grandmother to the local hospital. It's a general hospital that is always busy with older patients and staff. There are some private clinics around, but those doctors are also elderly, so they sometimes close due to their own health reasons. This probably results in the general hospital becoming overcrowded. After finally finishing the checkup and payment, we had to visit the pharmacy. The pharmacy next to the hospital was also crowded. Upon closer look, I noticed there was only one pharmacist. There was also a younger woman, but it seemed like she was only in charge of reception and payments. She probably hasn't obtained her pharmacist license yet. The pharmacist, a woman slightly older than me, was swamped with work. There was a staff wanted sign on the wall. I also have a pharmacist's license, although I have mostly been involved in research and haven't had the opportunity to use it. However, I believe I can handle the work of simply handing out medicines following the prescriptions. Later on, when I called the pharmacy to apply as a pharmacist, the process went smoothly, including document screening and interviews, and I was hired right away. I started working the following week. It seems like the pharmacy was really short-staffed. Within a few days of starting, I easily got along with my colleagues, and although I was still inexperienced, I managed to do my job. Thank you so much. It's great to have you here, Carter. You really help us out. So far, I have only been handing out prescriptions and explaining the components, which is the hard part. We are so short-handed. The pharmacist sighs and hands me a can of coffee. Her name is Catherine Smith, and she has been working at this pharmacy for about 5 years. Apparently, the pharmacist she worked with last year fell ill and retired, and since then it has been busy like this. During breaks, we chat and talk about what I was doing before I started working here. When I tell her I used to work at a pharmacy, she seems surprised. At a pharmaceutical company in New York, her eyes light up like a child's, and she says, "Wow." At a research facility of a pharma company? That's so cool. I can't believe you're also a pharmacist. So impressive. Well, I did face some serious issues at that job. When I say I resigned, she reacts as if it was a waste. It's not a waste. I had my reasons. I plan to stay here for a while. Well, I guess I can relax for a while then. I'm counting on you, Catherine says with a smile. Her gentle and comforting vibe like an older sister makes me instinctively nod in agreement. Until now, my work involved only research, studying drug components and effects, and reporting them on paper. I knew in theory who uses them and for what purpose. However, now I understand that we need to personalize the prescription for real use. While working at the pharmacy, I noticed many patients who have been prescribed medicines but have some problems. The drug works, but there are side effects. Many can't express their concerns properly. Lately, I've been having trouble sleeping. I mentioned it to my doctor, and they prescribed me some mild sleeping pills. But, I'm hesitant about taking them. Whenever I take them, I always get a headache. I still take them because my blood tests come back good. Perhaps if they informed the doctor, they might get an alternative prescription or might not need the medicine at all. Yet, for some reason, it's hard for them to say. But they can tell us, the pharmacists. Why? Probably because we're more approachable than doctors. We listen to the user's minor feedback and concerns, communicate with the doctors about them, and help the doctors choose the medicines. Compared to my previous job, this may seem trivial, but I feel useful and appreciated by both doctors and patients, and it's very rewarding. Looking back during my college and early job days, I hardly interacted with people. Now I even have casual chats with patients during work breaks. And I actually enjoy it, which is quite a change for me. I got used to the pharmacy work, became friends with local patients, and when I started living alone near my parents' home, Catherine and I became even closer. She's my only colleague, and she's easy to talk to, so I gradually opened up about my past job. When I mentioned the foreign objects incident at my previous work and my divorce, Catherine reacted as if it was her own problem. What? Leaving that company was the right call, and so was the divorce. When Catherine says this, it strangely makes me feel validated, as if it was the right decision. I feel like this is the first time someone outside my family truly understands me and supports me. To my surprise, I learned that Catherine is also divorced and lives near her parents' home with her 2 kids. Well, I'm pretty much in the same boat. My parents' home is the only place I could go back to. But now, I'm happy and I think things turned out for the best. Being in this small town, having a job and a wonderful colleague like Catherine, she smiles at me. Same here. I never knew such a peaceful life and mindset before. Although my research job was fulfilling, it looks like my current job, where I interact with people and feel useful, suits me better. It seems to fill the gap I didn't even realize existed before. Living here just like this, perhaps it might be good to settle down forever. Around the time I start thinking that way, that day came out of the blue. It was the day that an internal medicine conference was held, so the clinic was unusually closed, leaving the pharmacy pretty quiet. Though quiet, it might be an overstatement. Even though internal medicine was closed, the other departments were still seeing patients, so there was still some work to do. But my hands were relatively free. The morning appointments were done, prescriptions were dwindling, and I was thinking I might finally get a lunch break when a new customer walked in. I heard Catherine saying, "Hello," and turned my head reflexively. I couldn't believe my eyes. To my surprise, the CEO of my former company and my ex-wife, Emily, were standing there. The moment Emily saw me, her eyes welled up. "Carter, I've missed you so much." My first thought was, why the heck are they here? We have no reason to see each other anymore. There's nothing left to talk about. As I was completely speechless, Catherine understood the situation and said, "Why don't you take a break first? Feel free to use the break room. I can handle things here by myself." She then guided the CEO and Emily to the break room inside the pharmacy. Though it was their first time meeting Catherine, both the CEO and Emily took her kindness for granted. I've never noticed their presumptuous attitude before. but now it annoys me. Hey Carter, it's been a while. How have you been? Hello, I came to talk to you again today. I heard from your grandmother that you were working here when I visited your family home. His overly friendly demeanor was, in fact, unnerving. It reminded me of the time he proposed a matchmaking date. When I asked him directly what he wanted, he finally got to the point. After I left the company, he had appointed Jake as the team leader. However, Jake lacked leadership, the team was all over the place, and there were so many complaints from business partners. To make matters worse, Jake stole some research material and switched to working for a rival company. On top of that, another colleague revealed that the foreign substances incident was schemed by Jake. Apparently, this colleague, who was working late one night, saw Jake doing something with a new drug scheduled for clinical trials. When questioned, Jake brushed it off, claiming he was merely adjusting the composition. However, foreign substances were later detected during the clinical trials. The colleague confronted Jake, but he just stubbornly said he had nothing to do with it. By then, I had already resigned and Jake was the team leader. Plus, this colleague and Jake were old college buddies and owed many favors to Jake. Jake threatened him, saying that if he brought up the issue, it would be seen as the entire team's failure and everyone would be forced into mandatory leave or even termination. Out of fear, the colleague kept silent. However, after Jake left, he felt something was wrong and finally reported the incident. Upon reinvestigation, it was discovered that the drug was moved to a storage location the morning after Jake tampered with it, which means the last person to handle the drug, if the colleague's testimony was true, was Jake. While there's no definitive evidence, the fact that I left work on time on the day the colleague stayed late and arrived at work after the drug had been moved the next day cleared my name. So, it turns out you were innocent. I'm truly sorry. We'd like to hire you back, with the same benefits, no, better than before. Please come back. Ever since you left, I realized how indispensable you were. I was foolish. I shouldn't have said those hurtful things back then. We were both deceived. I'm sorry. Both the CEO and Emily bowed deeply, almost kneeling. But their pleas didn't move me at all. Of course, I was relieved to be proven innocent. But that was it. It's almost surprising how devastated I'd been before. I'm glad my name was cleared, but I like my life now. I have no plans to return. Upon hearing my firm reply, they exchanged glances. Come on, you're joking, right? You're going to waste your talent in a place like this. Carter, I want us to live together again in our old home. I'm sure we can start over. They both persisted annoyingly. They were so relentless that my tone gradually hardened. At that moment, Catherine peeked in from the door. Excuse me, I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help overhearing. I know it's none of my business, but do you two genuinely want Carter to come back? Well, of course, this town really needs Carter. All of us, including patients, doctors, and myself, appreciate him. With a gentle yet firm tone, Catherine spoke. Who the heck are you? It's none of your business, right? Isn't it the same for you? You put all the blame on him, and then divorced him. Now you suddenly want him back? What the hell do you think you are, you old hag? Enraged by Emily's blatantly rude remark, something inside me snapped. Hey, how dare you talk to my colleague like that? I've told you I want to work here. I have no intentions of going back. Oh, is that so? Just rot in the countryside, then. I only came to pick you up because Dad asked me to do so. I knew I made the right decision divorcing you. I never want to see you again. With a flood of cursing words as parting shots, Emily stormed out without looking at us. The CEO, Mr. Johnson, gave me a glance as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he followed his daughter without saying a word. Once they were gone, Catherine approached me with a concerned look. Carter, I'm sorry. I just had to say something. Maybe I went too far. She seemed genuinely remorseful. But what surprised me even more was seeing this assertive side of Catherine, which made me feel refreshed. It's fine. I had intended to decline from the beginning. Are you sure? I think she might never come back. I'm good. Like I said earlier, I really like it here. Hearing my words, Catherine beamed. Well said. Just remember that. And she gave me a playful slap on the back. A few months after that happened, I remarried Catherine. I'm still working as a pharmacist, at the local pharmacy. Having a rough time at my previous job was a bitter experience, but it led me to appreciate the joy of a profession that's more in touch with people and the local community, something I hadn't been aware of before. Without that experience, I wouldn't be leading the life I am now. Life is full of unexpected and tough moments, but I believe everything happens for a reason and leads to a better future. My name is Sean Edgewater. I'm just an ordinary office worker at a regular company. Been married for 3 years, and I live happily with my wife. My wife, Catherine, is a housewife. Living on just my salary can be a bit tight, but we've always found small joys in our everyday life. I met Catherine back in college. We were in the same club and classmates. She was as cute as a bunny. For some reason, she started to have a thing for me, and before I realized it, we were spending a lot of time together. Thanks to her making the first move, we eventually became a couple. Despite her delicate looks, she's pretty assertive and always took the lead. For an indecisive and timid guy like me, this was something to be thankful for. We humans tend to be attracted to what we don't have. Even now, I find her personality captivating. But lately, something's been bothering me. All right, it's done. On a certain weekend, whenever I have a free day with no plans, I always cook at home. That's my hobby. When I was young, my dad passed away unexpectedly due to an illness. My mom, who used to be a housewife, had to start working to support me. Naturally, her income dropped significantly. We moved to a small, cheap apartment and lived there, just the two of us. There were many days when she came home late. I couldn't help but feel lonely spending time alone at home. Because of poverty, I was always hungry. The one thing I always craved was my mom's cooking. She was great at cooking, mostly American dishes, thinking of me and Dad, but since they took time and effort, she rarely made them after starting her job. To recreate the taste of her dishes, I started cooking when I was in elementary school. At first, I didn't even know how to season things right and kept failing, but my mom was moved by my efforts and gave me tips on each step in seasoning. As I improved my cooking skills rapidly, she would smile at me, looking pleased. The joy of making someone happy with my cooking, my heart would warm up, and I spent my days cooking for her. Then, the time came to decide on a career path after high school. I thought about culinary school, but the tuition was a concern. I decided to take a student loan and go to college, hoping to ease my mom's burden even a bit. I wanted to get a decent job and earn a good salary. With that in mind, I gave up the idea of turning my passion for cooking into a career and went to college. After graduation, I got a regular job at a regular company. I didn't graduate from a top-tier college, so my salary isn't anything to write home about. But I was content with where I was. I'm not the ambitious type, so I wasn't desperate for promotions. I was happy as long as I could live a modest life with Catherine. Catherine, dinner's ready? I called out, laying the freshly cooked dinner on the table. Catherine had been watching TV in the living room, but she turned to look at me when she heard my voice. I got some chicken on sale today, so I made chicken stew. Chicken stew was my ultimate comfort food. It was in my top 3 favorites from my mom's recipes. Catherine sat down, looking a bit puzzled. Hey, stew again? I appreciate you cooking for me, but I'm getting tired of having the same old traditional dishes. Catherine, known for her picky eating habits, ate only what she craved. If she didn't feel like it, she might skip meals altogether. But these dishes are nutritious and tasty, right? Trying to lighten the mood with a wry smile, I offered Catherine her bowl. She let out a heavy sigh, seemingly out of annoyance. I just wanted her, someone who isn't particularly fond of vegetables, to get some nutrients. I get bored with the same type of food all the time, no matter how nutritious it might be. I don't want it. Upset, Catherine stood up and left the room. Left behind, I felt a weight of sadness. It seems like we've been arguing a lot over little things lately. I'm just trying to care for her and make her happy. Care for Catherine's well-being. Does she see my affection as simply meddling? Disheartened and no longer hungry, a bowl of chilled chicken stew sat before me. Taking a bite, I closed my eyes and thought of my mother. The memories of her love-filled days overwhelmed me. Years ago, in a cruel twist of fate, my mother passed away from the same illness that took my father. I am the only one left who can recreate my mother's recipes. I do not want to lose those memories associated with these dishes. So I kept cooking with all my heart. The next morning, I spoke to Catherine when she entered the living room. "Good morning. Breakfast is ready," I said, gesturing to the table. Fresh from washing her face and with her hair tied back, Catherine looked where I pointed and immediately frowned. "Didn't you listen?" I asked. Next to the breakfast I prepared, I had placed a small bowl of chicken stew, so it seemed she was irritated with me for that. "I just couldn't finish it all by myself. I thought maybe you'd like to have some," I said, trying to appease her. I watched as she took the bowl into the kitchen and without hesitation threw its contents in the garbage. Seeing this, my eyes widened in disbelief. Why would you think I'd want to eat something today that I declined yesterday? Catherine sighed deeply, placing the bowl in the sink with a clatter. The shock left me at a loss for words. Seeing my reaction, Catherine said, "I can't do this anymore. Let's get a divorce." Taken aback, I couldn't comprehend what was happening. Was I the only one who thought we had a happy marriage? I asked, "I'm sick of your dishes and the constant stories about your mom. It's too much, and I've lost my appetite." "I never asked to have all my meals dictated by you," Catherine said, seeming annoyed. I remained silent and hung my head down. "Besides, there's no sign of you advancing in your career. I can't continue this low-budget traditional lifestyle forever." "Let's divorce," she continued. Crushed by the unexpected blow, I felt devastated. True to her word, when I came home from work that day, all of Catherine's things were gone. On the table, there was a signed divorce paper. How did it come to this? I wondered, overwhelmed with regret and loneliness as tears streamed down my face. Half a year after the divorce, I secretly resigned from my company. Since the divorce was one-sided with Catherine leaving, there were no alimony payments. Working without any purpose and overwhelmed by emptiness, one day I was seized by a sudden impulse. That's right. Now that I'm alone, I can do whatever I want. Before getting married, I lived for my mom. After marrying, I lived for Catherine. I worked tirelessly and saved a decent amount from my bonuses. Using that as capital, I bought an old farmhouse. I renovated it all by myself and decided to run a small diner. Since I did most of the work alone, the costs weren't too high. I'll cook in peace here. Even when faced with criticism, my passion for cooking never waned. I don't want to forget my mom's taste. Looking at the recipes I jotted down in a notebook, I continued cooking every day. After running my diner for a while, a turning point came into my life. As I was running to the diner as usual, a woman walked in. She took a seat at the counter and after perusing the menu, quietly ordered beef stew and Caesar salad. As she joyfully savored my dishes, she started a conversation with me. "It's really delicious," she said. "Do you run this place all by yourself?" I nodded in response. Although her face was hidden behind large sunglasses, I could tell she was smiling. Nodding in satisfaction, she handed me a business card from her purse. "Would you allow us to feature your diner in our next issue?" she asked. With that, she took off her sunglasses and looked at me with a bright smile. At that moment, I was taken aback. She was the famous culinary expert, Jennifer Anderson. Known for her unique and tasty dishes and her beautiful appearance, she was always in high demand on TV, especially with the afternoon shows that were popular among housewives. She recognized the value of my cooking. I was lost for words, a mix of joy and surprise. "I see potential in you," she said. For someone who had almost given up on cooking, her words meant everything. 10 years later, I was thriving thanks to Jennifer's influence. Soon after, my diner became extremely popular thanks to Jennifer. She frequently mentioned me in various media, and soon I was even featured in magazines. Now I've expanded my business and have 6 outlets across the country. I make regular visits to each of them to ensure the taste remains consistent. I'd hate for people to say the original diner and the new outlets taste different. After all, this taste is a precious legacy from my mom. Amidst these busy days, I received an invitation. It seems an old college friend is getting married. Even though we hadn't seen each other in years, I wanted to catch up, so I adjusted my work schedule to attend. In no time, the wedding day arrived. Under a clear blue sky, a garden wedding commenced. The bride and groom were shining with happiness. Beside me were friends I had been close with back in the day. It felt like we had never been apart. We chatted and updated each other about our lives. This wedding seems a bit cheap, doesn't it? I turned to the familiar voice, and there stood Catherine. We hadn't met since our breakup, so I felt awkward and looked away. How much did they spend? It's just a standing reception, and the food isn't that impressive. Catherine critiqued the wedding as she chatted with a group of women. As always, she's not afraid to speak her mind when something doesn't sit right with her. But today is a celebration. Her comments that killed the mood made me feel a bit uneasy. Soon, our friends started to notice Catherine's remarks and started whispering, "Oh, I just wasted a big gift." With a chuckling tone, Catherine made this comment, and everyone around seemed disappointed. Oblivious to the tense atmosphere, Catherine noticed me and called out, "Hey, it's been a while." Catherine smirked as if she was mocking me a bit. Being approached by her at this moment was the last thing I wanted. But at one point I was married to Catherine. Was she always like this back then? With these thoughts swirling in my head, I zoned out while Catherine chatted away with our friends. Breaking up with you was the right choice. I remarried, and life is much easier than when I was with Sean. Saying this, Catherine laughed out loud while the others gave a forced smile. I tried to ignore her comments. My current husband earns $140,000 a year. He's a top-tier businessman, and our future is secure. She boasted with pride. After a few moments of silence, my friends burst out laughing. Caught off guard by this unexpected reaction, Catherine looked puzzled. "Catherine, don't you watch TV?" In a flustered tone, Catherine responded, "Back when we were married, I would do nothing all day but watch TV." Her not having time was probably just a front. My friends teased, laughing. At those words, Catherine's eyes widened. "What? What are you talking about?" I thought Sean was at a much lower level. I knew it. My hunch was correct. She misunderstood that by marrying a man with a higher income than me, she was somehow superior. And she repeatedly made condescending remarks about our old friends. There was no helping her at this point. "I'm glad you seem happy. Take care with your husband." Saying that, I exchanged pleasantries with the bride and groom and friends and left the venue. Catherine stood there, shocked. Later, our friends filled her in about my current status. A few months later, thanks to reconnecting with friends at the wedding, they occasionally visited my restaurant. I've always loved cooking, and even as the owner, I sometimes step into the kitchen. The business is thriving. Bringing joy to many people with my mom's recipes is the greatest happiness. Apparently, Catherine was shocked to learn about my success. She divorced the husband she had boasted about so much. Rumor has it that she was kicked out because of her lazy lifestyle and being too picky about food. With her elderly parents unable to support her, Catherine came to me out of desperation for money, but of course I turned her down. There wasn't an ounce of sympathy left in me for the changed Catherine. I seized an opportunity doing what I loved. Now I cherish the warm memories of meals with my mom, bringing smiles to people's faces every day with my food. I can't support you anymore. I can't believe in you at a time like this. I'm really sorry. I'm John Smith, 32 years old. Today I divorced my wife Mary, who became paralyzed from the waist down in an accident. I'm sure everyone will say that how I can abandon my wife in such a difficult time. But there have been so many things leading up to this. My wife and I struggled for years without having children. One day, we mustered the courage to undergo infertility tests at a specialized clinic, and it turned out that the issue was on her side, making the chances of having children very low. Mary cried every day, blaming herself and apologizing to me. I, too, didn't know what to say to her and sank into depression amidst these dark days. More misfortune awaited us. We first met during the university's ski club on the bus heading to the club's ski training. "Is the seat next to you vacant?" "Oh, sure." Mary, a junior, took the empty seat next to me. We bonded over skiing and quickly became close, meeting up at university and spending time together after the ski training. 3 years after graduating from university, we got married with blessings from our club friends. Everything should have been perfect, but we still couldn't have a child. Even after 5 years of marriage, there was no sign of a child, and Mary began to feel anxious. "Hey, Isabella, who was in the ski club with us, is going to be a mom too." It's just me from our ski club class who has no kids. Those were the recent topics of conversation. However, there was nothing we could do with our own efforts. We decided to gather our courage, visited a fertility clinic, and had tests done to see if there were any issues with our bodies. But the doctor's diagnosis was brutally straightforward. There are no particular issues with Mr. Smith's body. However, we found that Mrs. Smith has severe endometriosis. At this rate, it will be difficult for her to conceive due to the hindrance to fertilization and implantation. I was left stunned by the doctor's words, as if it were happening to someone else. I couldn't even cry because it was so unexpected. Mary, now knowing that she was the cause, lost all her energy and became despondent when we returned home. Am I never going to be a mother? I dreamed of having a family with you, John, and our kids having barbecue together. I comforted Mary, holding her close, and she repeated, "I'm sorry," like a broken record. Whether we have kids or not, I'll be happy as long as I have you, Mary. Let's discuss our future together carefully. I didn't know if she was convinced, but I did my best to convey my feelings. Mary nodded, but it was clear she was still carrying the burden. Time passed and it was December. The town was adorned with sparkling illuminations, and everyone was excited for the season. While the world was in a Christmas mood, we as a couple couldn't escape from our dark everyday life. Even when I finished my year-end work and came home, seeing Mary's depressed face made me feel suffocated. I wanted children too. But if we couldn't have them, I thought we could still build a happy family with just the two of us. I understood Mary's feelings well, but it was hard for me too. Gradually, our gears began to grind, shifting from "it can't be helped" to "please stop this." The relationship between our couple kept deteriorating, and there was nothing we could do about it. Perhaps Mary herself thought it was going in a bad direction, and one day she told me that she was going on a trip with her female friends to change her mood. I readily agreed and sent her off, asking her to refresh herself. I hoped that it would help Mary become more positive, but I would later regret not stopping her, even if I had to do it forcibly. Little did I know at the time that I would get involved in a big trouble that would drastically change Mary's future. Mary's destination for the trip was Colorado in the winter. She planned to enjoy skiing and talking with her friends, taking their ski equipment with them. She was looking forward to stopping by FIL on the way back, and FIL was where we had our wedding, a place filled with memories for both of us. Feeling relieved after seeing Mary off, I was working hard at the office. It was during this time that I received a call from an unfamiliar number. "Hello, is this John Smith's phone?" "I'm sorry for calling out of the blue. This is the Colorado State Police. I'm calling about your wife, Mary. Just a while ago, she was involved in an accident due to her car slipping on the snow." While listening to the explanation, I was in shock. Anyway, I explained the situation to my boss and rushed out of the office. How could Mary, who had waved so energetically just a while ago, be in an accident? And a slip accident? If it wasn't a call from Mary herself, it couldn't be a minor injury. I prayed that at least her life would be saved and rushed to take a plane. When I arrived at FIL, I was greeted by a frigid wind that seemed to slap my cheeks, and the landscape was covered in snow. I shook my head from the cold, confused by the sight, which was completely different from Los Angeles. I hailed a taxi waiting at the rotary in front of the station, heading straight for the hospital. Upon my frantic arrival at the hospital, several nurses and police personnel were waiting for me. "Mr. Smith, your wife is currently in the ICU," the nurse said, and guided me to where Mary was. I could see Mary through the glass of the ICU. Connected to numerous tubes throughout her body, even I, an amateur, could tell that this was a dire situation, and my anxiety grew. My hope that it was all a lie until I arrived had been completely shattered by the harsh reality in front of me. Tears welled up and streamed down my cheeks, but I had no energy to wipe them away. Once the nurse finished her explanations, 2 police officers began to speak. "Mr. Smith, we'll explain the details of the accident. Is that okay with you?" I felt a sense of unease from their manner, as if it was going to be a difficult conversation. "Your wife was traveling with another man. Did you know about this, Mr. Smith?" For a moment, I didn't understand what they were saying, and thought I must have misheard. Another man? Mary? No, I heard she was going with her female friends. Are you saying that's not the case? That was the only response I could muster. Mary meeting a man secretly. I was sure that I had heard about her plan to go on a trip with a female friend. But did she really tell me that she had secretly met up with the person she was cheating on and got into an accident? Seeing me fall silent, the police officers also seemed flustered. If you didn't know, it's okay. I apologize for any rudeness. Fortunately, the male passenger who was with her had only minor injuries and has already returned. Now, all we can do is wait for your wife's condition to stabilize. With that, the police officer left. Left behind, I sat down on a bench, holding my head in my hands. What in the world was happening? What was Mary doing? Why did she lie to me? I was zoning out for a while. In the distance, I faintly heard someone calling my name. Is Mary Smith's husband here? Your wife has regained consciousness. Upon hearing the nurse's voice, trying to deliver the good news as quickly as possible, I snapped back to reality. Rushing to Mary's side, she looked in pain, but seemed to want to convey something to me. John, I am so sorry. She mumbled these words, her voice faint and feeble. It's okay, don't worry. Hang in there, Mary. I reassured her with all my might, forgetting what the police officer had told me. Later I was called in by the doctor for an explanation. Will my wife be able to recover safely? With trepidation, I asked and received a grim explanation from the doctor. Unfortunately, your wife has suffered a severe spinal cord injury. There is a high possibility that she will have paralysis in her lower body in the future. So, you mean she won't be able to live a normal life like before? Many cases involve living with a wheelchair. In her current condition, your wife is likely to. I had prepared myself, but it was still a life-threatening injury. Or rather, her survival was almost a miracle. I felt like I had been pushed to the lowest point, and everything went dark before my eyes. From that day on, I visited Mary's hospital every weekend and accompanied her to rehabilitation. When Mary became able to eat on her own, I mustered the courage to ask her something that had been bothering me. Hey, Mary, there's something I really want to know. Who were you with on the day of the accident? Mary hesitated for a moment and showed signs of confusion. I'm sorry, but I can't tell you. I did something really foolish. Finally, Mary made a statement that confirmed the affair. This one statement became the final straw that led me to decide on a divorce. No matter how difficult Mary's life would be with her physical limitations, I was willing to support her if she was innocent. But if Mary had betrayed me, I couldn't see us living together in the long run. I finally broached the topic of divorce with Mary. She was deeply shocked, but eventually agreed to it. However, her father, who was my father-in-law, repeatedly tried to persuade me to reconsider the divorce. But I politely declined and completed the divorce proceedings. Mary and I, who had once loved each other so much and married, had our bond severed simply. 3 years had passed since I divorced Mary. It had taken a long time to recover. Since that day, the Christmas season had become a traumatic period for me, and every time I saw the city adorned with dazzling illuminations, my feelings were down. I sighed as I watched happy couples pass by. I felt miserable about trying not to interfere with them. Could it be? Are you Mr. John Smith? I was suddenly stopped by an unfamiliar man. I turned to see a man I had never met before. I believe this is our first meeting. I'm your ex-wife Mary's childhood friend. It had been a long time since I had heard that name, and I was both surprised and bewildered. Actually, back then I was the one Mary came to meet in Vale. I was hit with a shock like a hammer to the head. This guy and Mary? In response to his sudden confession, I felt my blood boil. What is this? Because of you, my life has hit rock bottom. Mary's condition has become irreversible. How could you approach me like this? I controlled my anger and confronted the man calmly, surprising even myself. If I didn't hold back, I might have attacked him. Everything had changed since that day. I had regretted it many times, all because of this man. You have every right to be angry, but please listen calmly. There's probably a misunderstanding because Mary didn't explain everything. Perhaps sensing my mood, the man cautiously prepared himself. First of all, I'm Lucas Williams. I'm Mary's childhood friend, and I work as a general practitioner in Vale. As he introduced himself, Lucas handed me his business card and began to explain the situation at the time. It seemed that Mary had consulted Lucas about infertility treatment. When Lucas told her that there was a renowned fertility specialist in FIL, Mary asked him to introduce her to the doctor and even requested a referral letter. If she was innocent, I didn't understand why she kept it a secret from me. But apparently, she thought that I would definitely be opposed to it because I was reluctant about infertility treatment. She had lied about going on a trip and secretly met the doctor referred by Lucas. I happened to be here today for a conference, and when I saw you, I recognized you immediately. I had seen pictures of your wedding with Mary before. I had been under strict instructions from Mary not to tell you, but I finally decided to tell you the truth. If I hadn't approached you today, I would have regretted it for the rest of my life. Lucas bowed his head repeatedly and earnestly asked me to meet Mary in person. He wanted us to hear the whole story from her and resolve the misunderstanding. Although I struggled to process everything, I eventually nodded deeply and promised to visit Mary's parents' house. On the weekend, after hearing Lucas's story, I took a plane and finally arrived at Mary's parents' house. I stood in front of the entrance, feeling lost and unsure of what to do. However, I still wanted to hear the explanation from Mary herself. Summoning my courage, I rang the doorbell. A soothing chime rang, and after a moment, the door opened. "Who is it, please?" Although I was confused because I heard a voice but couldn't see anyone at first, then I lowered my gaze. There was Mary in a wheelchair. "John, long time no see. I apologize for the sudden visit." I felt relieved to see Mary looking well. She seemed to be frozen in surprise. After a while, she skillfully maneuvered her wheelchair and guided me into the living room. "I happened to meet Lucas, who is your childhood friend. He told me everything. Did you really go to Colorado for infertility treatment that day?" Mary bit her lip and nodded. "Why didn't you consult with me beforehand?" As I asked again, tears welled up in Mary's eyes. "You said it was okay for us to live ourselves, but I really wanted to have your kids. I couldn't give up on it, but my actions were selfish, and it led to this condition. I can't burden you with caregiving. I can't have kids. And not only that, but I'll need care for the rest of my life. I thought that maybe we could both be happier if we separated." As if a switch had been turned on, Mary began to speak. It seemed like she was finally letting out the feelings she had been holding back, tears accompanying her words. She didn't keep it a secret from me out of malice. If it weren't for the accident, she would have just gone to the doctor through the introduction of her childhood friend. I guess she can't say everything anymore. I accepted without denying the suspicion of an affair. It was Mary's way of expressing her utmost love for me after her body had been left with a disability. I looked up with choked words. My father-in-law stood behind Mary. "I'm really sorry, John. I was also told by Mary to keep it a secret. But seeing our daughter, who had suffered an injury, become even more alone. As parents, we couldn't bear it. Please forgive me." I turned to both of them and straightened my posture. I'm also responsible for this. Even though Mary was stressing out so hard and being worried, I said insensitive things like, it would be fine even if we didn't have children. We should have explored various possibilities that would have satisfied both of us. I reached out and held Mary's hands, which were placed on her lap in the wheelchair. "Mary, I'm really sorry for leaving you alone all this time." I sincerely apologized to Mary for everything that had happened. Kneeling before Mary in her wheelchair, holding her hands, I looked like a knight seeking forgiveness from his princess. "Now, I understand what you meant back then, John. Even with a body that can't have kids, there was Mary in a wheelchair. I should have thought of ways to make you happy as your wife. I should have been grateful that you would stay with me, as you always have." Mary also revealed her honest feelings to me. Finally, we were able to express our regrets and reflections to each other. In this way, we corrected the years of misunderstandings. A few years later, we married. Both of us regretted our divorce and still had affection for each other. It wasn't an easy decision, but we wanted to start over. I proposed to Mary again and pledged my love to her. While Mary was delighted, she was also confused about her disabled body. I faced each of her anxieties head-on and discussed solutions. Our home was renovated to be wheelchair accessible, and we hired caregivers when I wasn't around. Even without children, we wanted to live together. We finally united in this desire and were able to move forward. I promised myself that I would never leave Mary's side again and that I would support her wholeheartedly.